Hello? Yeah? Do you hear us? Yeah. Hello, everybody. Welcome. So nice that you all came. I'm just doing a little briefing before we go on air, just because you are in a recording of a video podcast. So maybe obvious, but please put your phone on silence. And also sound-wise. Sometimes Farid, the moderator, will give you the word. There's a catch box, so you can grab the microphone, and he will let you know when you can speak or talk to each other. But for the rest, it's really good for the sound that it can be silent. So not a lot of whispering or stuff like that. That would be very helpful for the recording. In case of emergency and the whole place burns down, in the back of the building, there's the place that we all collect together. Cheryl is there, who's raising the hand. You can follow her guidance. And it's a recording, so I think you're all aware, but if somebody was not aware and has objections to be on the camera, let me know. You can personally let me know, and then we cut you out of the images. Yeah? It's nice before we go on air to tell me, so we reseat you also a little bit more practically. Okay? Anything else? No? Then I give the word to Annelieke.
Welcome, everyone here in the room, those of you joining online. My name is Mendha-Lekha. I'm currently the interim co-director of Bovens, together with Karin van Bokstel over there. Bovens is an environmental justice and human rights organization. We work with various civil society organizations across the world. And we are very happy to welcome you here in our office, here in Utrecht, for the third and the last session of the Future We See series. This series is really about hope, about inspiration, and I think we really need that today in the Netherlands, but also across the world. And this series is really about practitioners, visionaries, showing their views and their perspectives on how we can transform our systems and really get to this just society that we want to achieve. So we talked about economic systems, we talked about alternative food systems, and today we dive into inclusive decision-making processes, which is also the core of what Bovens does. We really fight for justice, for inclusion. People should be involved in the decisions that directly affect them. And we do that at very local level to international level, on environmental issues, on trade and investments, all that. So, well, the day after, or that's how it feels a little bit. And you surely all have your emotions and your thinking and your beliefs about the results of the elections. But it's clear democracy is not just casting our vote once every few years. There's many ways we can, share our thoughts. And it's not just the right for people to be involved in the decisions that affect them. We really need all the perspectives and the ideas of everyone to come to better decisions. And let's create much more space for dialogue, for meaningful dialogue, understanding each other, listening to each other, embracing diversity, unity, democratic values. And that's what we're going to discuss today with these great people, online and over here. And Farid will introduce you shortly. And Farid, for you, for those of you who not know him, he's the founding director of Studio Zeitgeist. Very busy in various boards, wrote a book, very often in the Financial Dagblad, daily newspaper, and he's going to lead us in the discussion today. Thank you so much for being here again.
I will. Thanks so much. Give her a hand. Thank you so much, and thank you for stressing that democracy is not only about a ballot box, as some of us used the ballot box yesterday, and I think it's also nice and very timely to have a day after a therapy session, maybe also partly today, to think about democratic decision-making. If there's one day we should discuss it, not only because of the Netherlands, but also during the weekend, Argentina, of course, which also elected somebody where you can say, well, the democratic credentials are not that much. We're going to discuss it with three great guests, but also with you. We have some music We have somebody who's going to draw what we have been discussing. So I think it's a very interesting afternoon and very hopeful afternoon, because I think our guests will introduce not only their thoughts but also their initiatives. And if you are online, great, you can join us, and also you can use the chat to ask any questions you like during our conversation, as for you as well. But let's start with our guests. Mirjam de Pachter, partner of the G1000 Citizens Assembly and founder of Burgerbraad Academie. I will introduce you a bit later. Ozan Alakavuklar, not bad, associate professor organizing social impact at the Utrecht University. We'll also have a few words for you about your introduction. But let's start with our person on the television from India, Milind Bokil. Great to have you here, and you hear us loud and clear, I see, thanks to your expressions. You're a writer, a sociologist, and expert on the village of Mendha-Lekha. So great to have you, and well, we're going to discuss not only what are the issues when it comes to democratic decision making, why is it important, what's the problem with current decision making, and then we'll have a conversation about what are the ingredients for better democratic decision making. And Milind, you also want to show a little clip to us, but maybe you can first introduce the clip we're going to watch, and then we'll see what your expertise means for this village of Mendha-Lekha. Milind.
Yeah, thank you very much, and I'm very glad to meet all of you there sitting. And this is a great advantage of technology, that I'm sitting in a corner of India and you are sitting there, and both of us can interact. So this village that I will be talking about is a very interesting village, in the sense that they have given a slogan which reads like, you know, our capital is Delhi. So the first part says, our government in Delhi. But the second part says that we are the government in our village, in our community. So the first part represents the representative democracy that all of us follow, but the second part represents the direct participatory democracy that this village follows. So we will hear more about this as we go along, but that is the whole context in which we will be doing this discussion.
Great for introducing this, and I think we're now going to have a look to the clip you wanted to share with us, so we get more of an impression about this village and its practices when it comes to self-governance.
तुमच्या जंगल कुठे आहे? सरकारच्या जंगल आहे. त्यावेळेला घुसखोरी चालत होता. मला तुमचा मोर्चा कुठे आणला? आमचा मोर्चा नव्हे, आमचा जंगल सत्याग्रह आहे, आमचा जंगल आहे. एक व्यक्तीचा सुद्धा खरा असू शकतो, आणि 100 लोक असले तरी त्यांचा खोटा असू शकतो. मग महिलांनी मुद्दा उचलला, चूक काय केले? आमच्या जंगलातून आम्ही आणलेला आहे. 350च्या वर 500-600 शस्त्रधारी पोलीस पूर्ण मला येऊन इथं गिराव टाकले.
जिथे लोक जागृत असतात आणि स्वतःचे निर्णय स्वतः घेतात, तिथे खऱ्या अर्थानं लोकशाही अस्तित्वात येते.
So we have an impression of the village and what the village is about. Milinti will discuss many things later on also when it comes to how this village works and what we can learn from that. But let's go to our second guest, Mirjam from the G1000. Yeah. Great to have you here. A great initiative. Maybe you can also tell us a bit something about this Citizens Assembly.
Yeah. I will. Well, I'm Mirjam de Pachter from G1000 Foundation in the Netherlands, and we've been organizing citizens' assemblies all through the Netherlands for the last 10 years. So we've done a lot of citizens' assemblies and learned a lot about also things not to do. I believe there should be a video, but it's not playing, but that's fine. It gives you a bit of an... there it is.
Yeah. Visuals without sound, you're
exactly.
the sound.
I will talk about a bit, but it gives you a bit of impression how a citizens' assembly can look like. So you get a bit more of a feel, but it's in Dutch, so we chose to not. But you can look it up. That's me. And this was a citizens' assembly we did on for the provincie Zuid-Holland. And we did 3 citizens' assemblies at the same time about 3 topics. And this one was about housing. And later on we put these 3 citizens' assemblies together, and they talked about what they found really important together for the whole province of South of Holland. And to tell you a bit more about what a citizens' assembly is, because maybe some of you have never heard of a citizens' assembly. In Dutch it's called burgerberaad, so maybe you've heard of that. And we choose our members by sortition. So people get an invite, then we do a second sortition to have like a big diverse group of people who talk about a topic. And it's all based on dialogue instead of debate. And in that way people really find out what they think together is important for the future. And they work on different topics. And there are really, so I think the hopeful part of this is that there are really different kind of people in the room, and they're always really willing to come to an agreement.
Thanks. I think that's a great executive summary or elevator pitch for the G1000. How long has the initiative been going on now?
It's for almost 10 years.
10 years of experience with it. So we have quite some experience to discuss what works, what doesn't work, and what does it mean for the future of decision making. And I think the G1000 is a beautiful, the burgerberaad is a beautiful example of this. Ozan, beautiful, because you're into organizing social impact. Well, talking about impact, which is a word which I think we see more and more often. How did your interest in organizing social impact started?
Yes, I'm a critical organization studies scholar and have been working for Utrecht University School of Governance for around 4.5 years now. And in the last 3 years, we have been working on developing this master's program called Organizing Social Impact. And this reflects our research interest, but also bring our pedagogical engagement with students who would like to create impact in the society by engaging with various organizations. And for us, we have a particular understanding to engage with social impact because we see that there are lots of pressing challenges right now, and at the political level, at the economic level, environmental level. And we see that there are various bottom-up organizing or bottom-up organizational processes that challenge or that tackle these kind of societal and economic pressures. So for us, we see that university, we see the higher education should take role and engage with this kind of ongoing social change efforts. And our program brings students, grassroots organizations, and practice of social change together, and also with some critical theoretical engagements. So I am the program coordinator, co-coordinator of this program, and my research is directly at this intersection between research, teaching, impact, and engaging with various organizational forms, particularly alternative organizational forms, which I will talk in the coming questions.
We definitely will, because I think it's great that we have this expertise with you here as 3 guests, but I'm sure there are also other participants in citizens' assemblies and knowledge, so let's share it with each other. Can I start with you, Ozan, because you say yourself also there are grand challenges, so this is also why we have to reorganize also our democratic process. But what thing is mostly wrong with our current ways of making decisions as societies, or maybe you want to focus around higher education institutions? Up to you.
Yes, I would like to begin with a very brief kind of personal story, because I got my education in a business school, and what struck me most was this corporate as a model, as in a kind of organizing way, which is actually quite hierarchical, quite profit-oriented. And there are some decisions made at the top that direct impact on others. And then the question is, okay, how can we organize differently so that we can have a say in the way we organize our decision-making processes, but also have some say in the ownership models. So for me, I am really at the intersection of economy and politics, looking into these kind of challenges and how our ownership models can be different so that our decision-making models might be different and we can have a say in the decisions that have direct impact on us and the way we organize ourselves. Maybe a good example might be here at a meso level, at a macro level, is 2008 financial crisis and afterwards, because here what we have seen is that these big financial corporations were falling down and the decision was made to save them instead of investing in public services. Yeah. So what does this tell us? To what extent we can give voice and to what extent we can transform these kind of relations for the sake of taxpayers, for the citizens? And then also at an organizational level, how can we organize things differently so that we have a say in the ownership of, for instance, the business or the social enterprise, and then we can give decisions by ourselves. So these are the kind of entry points for me in the sense of how things should change, beginning from challenging the power relations, coming from ownership, coming from economic relations, and turning this into more political change.
Yeah, that's a very relevant perspective to take into account when it comes to ownership. The issue is now the way how we own things or not own things and how we change them. So I think that's very interesting for the coming discussion today. Milind, if I ask you what's currently wrong with our ways of making decisions, how would you define the problem?
Yes, I think we consider democratic decision making as the epitome of human civilization. And we think that democracy itself is a great thing, which is true. But the way we take decisions is usually by majority vote, 60-40, 70-30, or even 51-49, and so on. So when you do majority vote, there is implicit violence made against those who are in minority. Now, minorities are of various types, and they are based on ethnicity, they are based on religion, they are based on faith, and they are based on some other perspectives also. So in majority decision making, this injustice or violence is very much implicit into it. And that doesn't take into consideration what the other party is saying. It is quite possible that those who are opposing or those who are not in agreement might be saying something very true, very genuine, and that's something we must understand. We must factor that into our decision-making process. But because we go with majority decision-making, we don't care for those who are in minority or those who are in opposition or those who want to say something. Or sometimes we go with the so-called veto rights, like UN Security Council, that only 5 countries have veto rights. And we know that many decisions which are good for the whole world are not taken because some countries do not want them to be taken. So this is precisely the problem with our democratic decision making, that we follow majority vote. Yeah.
Thanks, Milind. It's what you show is that we're kind of stuck with the instruments we're currently using, and we put this sticker democracy on that, but you are actually guessing if that's actually the right way of using the word democracy for things which are not very democratic when it comes to majority perspectives. Miriam, how's that for you? What's for you the most biggest problem when it comes to how we come to decisions on whatever level we're discussing? We'll make it more concrete later on, but
well, I think, at this moment, of course, we had the elections last night, and I think it's more of a popularity contest instead of really about all these topics that are really a big problem. And the politicians are really, it's really about the person, not anymore about statements, and that really worries me. And the politicians are really, when they make decisions, they're already thinking about new elections. Will I be re-elected? What will this mean for my political party? While in a citizens' assembly, people can talk about the future without all these worries about, will I be re-elected or anything like that. And I think a really big difference is also that it's all about debate in the current way. So it's really about what separates us on the things we don't agree on, instead of what is our common ground. What do we share? What do we think is important?
Yeah, interesting, because this also feeds into what Milan said when it comes to majority decision making as seen as democratic, but you're actually also problematizing this.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Interesting. And what do you think of the suggestion of Ozan when it comes to ownership? Is that something?
Yeah, I think the really base of like a citizen assembly is that you put the ownership back to the society as a whole, instead of doing it really top down. Mm-hmm. So I really believe that a citizens' assembly can, if you do it in the right way, decide which way the future has to go to as a society as a whole. So I really agree with that as well, because, and also for this ownership, it's really important that if you do this process in the right way, people feel again engaged and feel ownership on the problem, but also on the solutions. So you get this shared ownership on the problems, and people are not saying anymore, well, they don't do anything, but they're saying, okay, what can we do together?
Yeah, yeah. Also, and I think it's very interesting what Miriam says about polarization, also when it comes to different groups. Does ownership also feed into that? Is it also feeding polarization in that sense, you think? Is there a link?
I think ownership here is more really coming from an economic perspective, where the power lies. Yeah. So I think that's, at least for me as a critical organization scholar, to look into where the power lies and what kind of interests are at play. And from this perspective, we can actually unfold the relations, unfold the power relations and see. Because if you begin with the assumption that we are on an equal basis, particularly in the democratic sense, then we may miss actually there are some other interests behind. Yeah. And we, for instance, a very good example might be American politics, a political era, that we hear that, or we know that there are lots of lobbyists trying to intervene into the democratic political processes. Why? Because they have this kind of interest, they have this kind of expectation for their own group, and how can we then argue that what we say here as majority will be reflected at the decision making? So again, I think this economic ownership and trying to have a say in the way we give decisions about how resources will be used, how these resources can benefit for majority, might be also a kind of entry point to understand this relation. So polarization at the political level, but at the economic level, how these are interrelated is a question to me.
Yeah, that's interesting. And then it becomes more constructive. Instead of a debate, it becomes the dialogue that also Miriam is feeding into. Milind, what I find interesting about your majority, or interesting, could you give an example, what Indian examples when it comes to what are the effects of this majority approach when it comes to how democracy being seen?
No, see, in any given setting, when you see majority taking the decisions, then as I said, the minorities are always neglected. So the solution to this is actually suggested by Mahatma Gandhi, because Mahatma Gandhi throughout his life was concerned with only one thing: non-violence, truth and non-violence. So what is the non-violent method of taking decisions? So consensus decision making, that is, everybody's consent is required, and unless everybody agrees, you can't take the decision. You should not take the decision. That is the real solution to our so-called democratic decision making, that we should go by consensus. And this village, the clip that we saw, is one very remote tribal village in the central India, based in the state of Maharashtra, but in Maharashtra also it is in the easternmost area. So this tribal village was taking decisions by consensus. That was their tribal ethos and that was the tradition. But these decisions were taken by men. Only men would come to the assembly and they would take the decision. So can you call this consensus? No, you can't call, because women are not there. So when these social workers went to these villages, and some of them are my friends, and they started working with the village, they said, no, this can't be true consensus. Unless women come to the assembly and unless they sit together, you can't call it consensus. So the whole process began with women's participation, and women coming into the assembly putting their voice, putting their decisions, putting their opinions, and then only the whole consensus could really arrive. And this is similar to what she said about the citizens' assemblies. Now, citizens' assemblies in Netherlands are, I could see from those pictures that people are participating. The same thing happens in this village. When you allow everybody to participate, then everybody's internal potential comes out, and then that helps towards a more harmonious, more non-violent, and more amicable decision making, which satisfies everybody, and it's a justice to all.
And could you illustrate a step which was taken, you say, so that there was a tradition of consensus, but only for one part of the village, mainly men, or only men. What steps were taken to include the women's voice so that it actually became a citizens' assembly on village level?
Yeah, so why women were not coming? Because the men would drink, and men would drink alcohol, and then they would quarrel and things like that.
Yeah.
So women said that if you want us to come, then you stop drinking alcohol in public. You can drink alcohol in your home, and that's all right. But in public place, no alcohol sale, no drinking. And that's how the whole process began, that the women insisted. Now, the beautiful part is, suppose you want to ban the alcohol or liquor consumption, and if you want to do it by consensus model, then you will have to take into consideration those who are drinking. You can't just force your majority decision saying that you should not drink. So even there, the whole process of consensus has to unfold. And it took some time. It took almost 1 year before those who were drinking had to abandon drinking, and they said, okay, we agree, we will not sell liquor in this village, we will not drink in public. And then the true consensus began to appear. And that is how this village and the slogan that they gave, that we the government in our village, that if we want to run our own affairs, then we should be working together as a family. And just like in a family, we consider each other, we care for each other. That is how the village has been coming up, and that's how they have been developing their natural resources. Yeah.
Thank you, Milind. I think this is interesting, because here it comes, what are the right circumstances we need to actually make something like this work? And you said, well, the circumstance should be not drinking alcohol, which is a very important start for having a sane conversation. What are the, let's navigate here also with you here too, Miriam Ozan, who wants to start. What are important circumstances to have a correct citizens' assembly? And then Ozan, also your perspective on that.
Yeah, I think a really diverse group is already, so you get these real different kind of perspectives in the room.
Okay.
And it's also important that you're all in the room together, so you can look each other in the eye.
Okay.
And see who's sitting next to you. And you're talking to each other on a base of equality, so there's no hierarchy that the voice of you is more important than my voice.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
And it's all based on dialogue, so we have these rules we start with. We start citizen assemblies with some rules on the way we want to talk to each other. And one of the really powerful rules is you don't have to agree. And of course, later on in the Citizens' Assembly, you have to agree. But if you start with this rule, you see people to start telling each other stories instead of trying to convince the other that they're right. So I always think this is really powerful for people to just sit in each other. And we start with small groups, make changes. So you speak to a lot of people, a lot of different perspectives. And then later on in our Citizens' Assembly, also a lot of processes are based on consensus. And the basic of our work is also based on non-violent communication. So you really talk about what are your needs or what do you think is important. That's mainly the basis of this thing. And I can talk more about.
I'm sure you can talk for hours. One more question, then we go to Ozan, because the first sentence you said, a diverse group is crucial. What do you mean with a diverse group?
Well, I think at least that there are a lot of different perspectives.
Okay,
so
that's for you diversity.
Yeah,
okay,
that's for me diversity.
Yeah.
And a bit of a risk is when you say it has to be representatives.
Yeah, sure,
totally.
For the population or the.
Yeah, exactly. But that's a bit of a. I always think that's the biggest challenge. And when one person steps out of the group, then you already don't have this anymore. Yeah. So I'm always talking about a really diverse group. I think that's more important.
Yeah. No, I think it's a very strong definition. Ozan, when it comes to the circumstances to make sure that we can make the right decision. We had some great examples from India, from Miriam.
Yeah, I guess the interest of everyone should be at least on the table. And then from there, perhaps we can begin a kind of open conversation, what's going on in this kind of environment. And I guess it's really important at what level really we talk about here. It's about representative politics, it's about representative democracy, is it about a kind of, for instance, cooperative worker ownership model, or is it a kind of, for instance, in my case, I can give a scholarly journal management, for instance. I'm involved in a kind of academic journal, and we all give decisions as a collective, and then there are these missions that, or there's this task groups that you get into, and then there's this mission bringing us together in the journal, and we try to do things a bit differently because I do not want to bore with you the stuff about academic politics, but for instance, there are many journals who are published by big companies.
Oh, yeah, sure, yeah.
And in order to publish also that sometimes not in order to publish, but for instance, universities pay enormous amounts of money in order to get these journals in their libraries.
Yeah.
In our case,
it's a great business model.
Oh yeah, it's a very very nice free academic labor exploitation model, let's call it. So we publish, we read, we review, and then they they turn it into a kind of nice profitable business.
The jackpot. Yeah.
Yes. So, for instance, in this kind of environment, what kind of democracy we talk about, what kind of decision-making process we talk about. So we, with some colleagues, we are part of this journal, we call it the journal called Ephemera, and it is really organized around on equal basis, no hierarchy, just the managing director, there are some tasks and related to publishing, and these are open access. So we put our labor here actually, that is made available for all the academics. And we do not really think of turning into a kind of publishing model or a profitable publishing model. So the key here is, I guess, what are the interests, what's the motivation, what's the mission, and how we can do things a bit differently in the sense of this opening up decision-making practices, being open to each other, and sort of having a consensus decision-making process about the future of the actions in the journal.
Yeah. It's very interesting, where transparency is a very important
Yes.
circumstance
Yes.
to arrange. And why is it so tough to make these things more transparent?
Oh, good one. I think again, it is if it is too hierarchical, for instance, that how you need to know what's going on around, what kind of decisions are made at the top level, and then again. If there are decisions having direct impact on you, and how can you make sure that you keep these people accountable to you? I think these are the mechanisms, or these are the procedures we need to think about when it comes to democratic decision making. What are the interests? And maybe sometimes these interests may not align, and maybe our reading of society can be a bit different. Maybe we can say that there's a kind of ongoing struggle here, right? That there are those who want to have a bit more fair distribution of resources, and there are those who have the resources, like 100%, 99% kind of discussion we see in the Occupy movement. So in this kind of environment, how can we organize ourselves so that we keep other people who give decisions about the distribution of resources more transparent and accountable for the needs of the people, for the needs of the citizens? And again, when we look at the history of privatizations, neoliberal politics around the privatization of market relations, then we miss that actually there are many people who are under the radar and who are not, whose interests are not considered. So for me, it's a matter of power relation, and how can we make these power relations visible so that we can keep these people or organizations or institutions accountable to us and also to each other.
Yeah, yeah. I think there's maybe already some questions, but let me first ask accountability when it comes to Milan and to you, Miriam, how important that is, because I think it's an important notion. So Milan, could you share how does this accountability work within the village, for instance, or other examples you have?
Right. So, see, as Ozan just now said, that there are always differences in people. There is a lot of inequality, especially in traditional societies like India. There is a lot of inequality in it. And there are rich, there are poor, there are privileged people, and so on and so forth. So, when it actually comes to taking decisions, and many people have apprehensions about how consensus could be achieved, and accountability is very much part of it. So, that consensus can be achieved only if all of you agree beforehand. For example, this room we are sitting now, and all of us are sitting in this room, and suppose after this lecture we have to decide whether we will have tea or coffee or soda or something. Now, do you think we can achieve consensus on this? Everybody will say no, because I want to drink tea and she wants to drink coffee, so we can't agree, and that's how it should be. So the principle of consensus is that everybody should be able to drink as per one's choice. That is the principle of consensus. And that principle, you must agree beforehand. Before coming to the meeting, you must agree that you will take the decisions by consensus. And that is the beauty of this principle. That once you agree that everybody has this power to say no, a kind of veto power, but not veto power in the hands of privileged few, but veto power with everybody, then alone this principle works, and then only your decisions become accountable. And you become accountable to other person, she becomes accountable to you, and so on and so forth. So equality, non-violence, understanding each other, sharing one's other perspectives, and what Mariam says in the Citizens Assembly, that instead of instead of countering somebody else, you try to understand the other people's perception, you try to understand what the other person wants to say. Or in many decision-making process, some people are opposing because there is certain grievance, there is some problem that they want to express. So understanding other person's problems, understanding other person's perception is the basis of it. And equality, as I said, equality between sexes, equality between rich and poor, and so on and so forth. That is how the whole gamut is then set up. So before coming to the meeting, you accept the principle, and then the principle works, and then you won't have apprehensions.
Yeah. So accountability is actually part of the process, and it starts with the whole process. I think, Miriam, you can really relate to this, right?
I can really relate to that, indeed. I think it's also, and that's in the process, right? So the participants, so that's why we start with these rules, and sometimes people don't agree, and they leave the room. That's fine as well.
It happens?
Yeah, sometimes it happens, but it aren't that many, but sometimes they say, well, I came for a discussion. I don't want to have a real dialogue, so I just wanted to make my point, and that's it. Yeah. But because of the...
Many times we take this mindset with us because we're...
Yeah, and it's
really... almost programmed sometimes.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so it's really a new way of talking to each other. And what you see happen with the participants is that they really go from a personal interest to a shared interest. And that's just by the process they are, they're how do you say it? They walk through this process. And you really see a different way of thinking starting to happen in these processes. But I wanted to bring it to a bit more of a broader perspective, because it isn't only about the people that are in the room, but also the people around it. So we're also looking for commitment and an agreement on forehand, like from the local governments, or depending on which kill we are working, that on forehand they are going to take the outcomes of the Citizens Assembly seriously. So what we do is we have a partner agreement in which our partners, and that's mostly the local government, is saying, okay, we respect the independence of the process, so we don't interfere in the process, even if we think the outcome won't be good. And that's really important.
To sit on their hands, as they say in Dutch.
And we will take it seriously, so we either are going to take it in our policy, or we'll explain why we can't take over some of the recommendations. But we do not only do this with the government, but also with other partners. Like, for instance, we did one in on regional level, and there we had 29 partners at the Citizens Assembly. So there weren't only politicians, or wasn't only the government that was saying we're going to take the outcome seriously, but it was about housing. So we also had like big builders, and we also had social housing companies. So we had all these parties that were saying on forehand, we're going to take this outcome seriously. And we also have this process in the Citizens Assembly where the participants also feel a real big ownership on the outcomes of the Citizens Assembly. So often they say, well, these things, we don't need a government. We can do this by ourselves. There are outcomes, you don't need them, right?
Sure.
But sometimes they need the help of a company or something else. So that's why we work with more partners than just the governments. And at the end, we have these, we call it an initiative group or a monitor group. that are participants, a small group of participants that are saying after the Citizens Assembly, we still want to bring this citizens agreement further.
Yeah. Interesting. Any comments or questions already from this conversation? No, not yet? Yeah, do take the floor. Yeah, and I have a catch box here. So, catch. Who are you and what do you want to add? Question?
Hi, my name. Yeah, thank you. Thanks so much for all the great presentations. My name is Niels and I work at Bovens. I have two questions.
Okay.
My first question would be, what is the relationship, or how does, like, when you're discussing in consensus making, how does compromising is that part of it, or is that really something else? Because for me, you know, when I go to Paris, to the OECD, they have also concession decision making, but it's oftentimes more like a compromise.
And what's the problem with a compromise? It becomes bland. It becomes something.
Well, I mean, it's oftentimes not really ambitious enough to reach climate goals, for example.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah. So
Let's start with that
maybe
one?
let's start.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Millens?
Yes.
Miriam? Or
Sorry,
something?
Yeah, I mean, this is a beautiful question, and many people have this thing in their mind that when you say consensus, are you going to bulldoze a consensus? Are you going to enforce consensus? No, that is not the idea. The consensus is that your basic problem, your grievance, you know, it is not a process to erase your opinion, or it is not a process to discount your opinion. It is that all of us have to take certain decisions, and mind you, these decisions are basically taken at a very small micro level or at a village level or a community level. So there, when you want to take a certain decision, then if all the people are agree to that, then the decision can be performed better. So you don't have to compromise. You have to actually put forth your point very strongly, and you must try to convince even another person, saying that, look, what I am saying is right and I feel right, and so let me put it forward. So everybody puts it forward, and then out of that churning, consensus emerges. So consensus is by no means bulldozing anybody's decision, because then that would be majority decision making if some people started bulldozing the decision. Consensus really allows you to put forth your viewpoint, give you a chance to convince other people, and then try to attain something in a very, very non-violent manner. If we bulldoze the decision, then it will be very, very violent. Even compromise is a violence, I would say. So you shouldn't be feeling compromised. You should feel that, yes, my view has been heard, and for this own purpose, I feel convinced, and that's why let us come to this consensus decision.
Great. More perspective on this?
Yeah.
Miriam,
Well, I think the way you do a citizens' assembly is like so totally different than in a debate in which you come to a compromise. Because we always start with the question, what do you think is important about this topic? And when you share the things you find important, you get all these different kind of perspectives before you make a decision. And then you really see the shift which people make from their personal interest to a shared interest. So you can, as a society as a whole, you look to what do we think is important for the future. And so sometimes you see someone who says, well, this is really not in my personal interest, but I understand why it is important for us as a society as a whole. And I want to quote one of the politicians who was involved with citizens' assembly in Reden, and he was saying it is encouraging that citizens can achieve what governments cannot achieve at international climate summits, working on natural gas-free villages and neighborhoods and a green and climate-proof environment using new materials sparingly and produce less waste. So I think that's really hopeful that citizens are capable to make these decisions together if you talk about it in a dialogue.
Yeah, great.
Just a small addition. I guess the notion of compromise, probably this may take place, but I think the solidarity aspect or the community aspect may play a critical role. Maybe for this kind of very major, very large scale kind of decisions, lots of things going on, lots of power relations may go on. So it would require a definite certain analysis, but for these citizen assemblies or for this kind of community initiatives or even for cooperative organizing, for instance, when it comes to my topic, it is not only about what I will get out of this, it's more about, okay, what we can get out of this kind of conversation, and do we have a say in the future that we want to put or that we want to create together. And that is the kind of perspective I would like to bring. So to what extent we can have a more solidar environment, solidarity practices, so that we can think about not only well-being of us, but also the others. Of course, again, scale is a very major, can be a constraint, but also enabler, I guess.
No, convincing answers, no?
No, those answers were really helpful. Thank you. Yeah. So second question then maybe?
Second question,
yeah,
okay.
sure.
Right.
If I can. So I can see this working on a local level. How would it look like on a, let's say, the Netherlands at a national level? So how would democracy in the Netherlands look like on a consensus basis? Could you sort of picture that for us?
Yeah, sure.
Well, Milan, take the floor. Take it away, Milan.
Okay, because I am so remote that I have to come in. No, you are perfectly right. You know, many times people have this question that at a community level you can attain consensus because everybody knows each other, people are a part of the family, so on and so forth. But what happens in Parliament? But suppose, as Mariam just now shared, is it your personal interest or is it going to be a general interest? Is it going to be people's interest? Is it going to be humanity's interest? And then if you think from that perspective, then you will find that consensus is not difficult to achieve. We have our own petty, selfish, vested interests, and that's why we put forth our viewpoints very strongly. But when we are motivated to take interest in the larger interest of humanity, or something which transcends all our personal interests, then consensus can be even better achieved. And debates are most welcome. I mean, it doesn't happen that automatically consensus will happen. There will be debates, there will be discord, there will be dialogues, people will try to convince each other, but ultimately, there is a feeling that we want to take some decision and we must understand each other. Even in Parliament's decision can be taken. Now, Parliament, the problem is, people come from so-called opposition parties. And even before coming to the decision, they have decided that I am supposed to oppose. So that is why the problem comes.
True.
Otherwise, if many questions, like for example, war. Do you really want to have a war? Nobody wants to have a war. But some people want to have a war because that caters to their selfish interest.
Yeah.
So if you really rise above your personal selfish interest, and if you think about the larger good of the society, then consensus is very easy to achieve. And this is something which we have to do it and then learn it. You know, we can have any number of theoretical discussions, but unless we do it in our small group or in our community or something, we won't understand the beauty of it. That is the thing. Do it and see how it works.
Miriam, maybe also it's interesting to bring in what France is doing when it comes to the climate panel they had, and
Yeah, I think that's really interesting as well, and maybe many of you know also in Ireland about abortion. There was a citizens' assembly about abortion, which was really interesting. That at the end of the citizens' assembly they decided for abortion, which was a really hot topic there and quite polarized, and that were just 99 citizens that were talking about, but still then there was a referendum and the whole of Ireland was for it as well. So you can discuss, there's just a small group of people, but there also happens something with whole society when you see this diverse group of people talking about things, and if the process is transparent enough and citizens are taken seriously, then you can also see whole society make this shift. And like, for instance, in France, where the commitment and the mandate wasn't that well managed, but that's another discussion. That there the citizens were way more, how do you say it, progressive than you would have thought on forehand. So where politicians are sometimes a bit afraid to make really hard decisions, these citizens didn't have a problem with that. So I think that's also really interesting about these citizen assemblies, that you see this happen there as well, with this diverse group, that they're still very ambitious in the things they want for the future.
Yeah, thanks.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you. More questions? Yeah. No, Rila.
I was wondering, hi, I'm
Hi.
Christel Berghout. I've had the privilege to work with a Citizens Assembly in de gemeente Zeist lately. I'm very interested on your vision concerning time. Like, I forgot your name, but Minute, talking for a year about alcohol or not in consensus method. Well, I experienced that time is really a very important factor to be able to be in a dialogue, listening to each other, not discussing, but actually taking your time to consume what the other person is saying, what you're feeling about it, what are the values behind. So what is your view on time in a citizens' assembly?
Oh, beautiful question, wow. No,
Should I start?
No, Milan, you're later. Let's go with Miriam.
Yeah, I think time is really important, to really take the time to get to know each other and hear about each other's perspective. But it's also a challenge because some people don't have that much time for a citizen assembly. So we're always we're really learning in what is the best way. And like when you do this in a small village, people can come by their bikes, it's in the evening, they know each other. It's easier than like on a regional level where people have to go by car, have to come from their work from far away. So what we're trying to do is find the right balance, and it sometimes just depends. It also sometimes depends on the topic, right? If it's really challenging topic, you need sometimes more time, especially to work with the proposals, and sometimes you accept that it's none of the processes are perfect. Sure. So I think that's the first thing you have to accept, and also the proposals won't be perfect, but you try with the best you have. So I think at least like 4 or 5 meetings is at least the thing you should do, but that's really concrete, so don't. Yeah.
No, but it's great. One of the right circumstances is it doesn't have to be perfect. I mean, it's a whole different scope. Ozan, on this?
Yeah, just very briefly, actually, just following up on that, nothing is perfect, and there are all these kind of experiments, and it applies to many things, actually. And I guess, the priorities, what's our priority here? What's it about? And here, at the community level, the priority is the well-being of the community. If the Citizens' Assembly, it's about how we can give voice. And then the question comes, okay, we may talk about this maybe weeks, but do we have this kind of luxury? Maybe not. So then what are we do? So we do, that's kind of my perspective here, we do our best within the given constraints. And then trying to make it all the time better and better and better, and learning from the experiments and our experiences. And still, I guess that's why also we are here, right? That we are still learning from this kind of experience to make it better. And that also applies to many other structures about representative democracy. Is it the perfect model? Not there yet. No. Citizen assemblies, yes, lots of values in it. The perfect model, getting there. So, or ownership models, as I argue about. Cooperatives, for instance, look like a wonderful model because we have immediate say in the future of what we own. It might be our labor, it might be the infrastructure, it might be the product we produce. But still, we are not autonomous from the other institutional and market relations. So there are all these kind of pressures. How you navigate these pressures, so on and so forth. So my point is, it's a matter of learning and taking the courage to learn from all these kind of experiences.
Yeah. And how do we mix them? We'll discuss that after the break. Milans, very shortly, because we have another question.
Yeah.
And then we have some great music coming up. So short, third question, music, and then we continue our conversation.
Yeah, I would like to show you a couple of pictures before the music so that this point is illustrated. So those photos, please.
We have the pictures in front of us.
Yes. So you see here how these people sit. They sit in a very relaxed manner, and they use another technique to bolster the decision-making process. That institution is called study circles. So when a decision is to be taken, it is first discussed in study circles. And the study circles sit everywhere. They sit in the corners, they sit in the streets, they sit in somebody's house. And the decision is actually taken only in the General Assembly. But the groundwork, the preparatory work is done in the study circles. So whatever grievances you have, whatever apprehensions you have, they are all quizzed out in the study circles. And people, when they come to actual decision-making process, they are ready with the decision. So it is not just one process. There are multiple processes occurring at multiple levels and at different junctures of time. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, thanks. Another question.
Thank you. I'm Anna Flavia, a sustainable development student, a master's student at Utrecht University. And I had two questions. Maybe you can choose which one you would rather answer. The first one is, what do you think like the main first step would be to have this mental switch within people to want to even start this compromise, this conversation rather than debates? So like from a social stance, how can we step outside of our rather individualistic bubble to even commence this process? And the other question was perhaps from a more environmental stance. How do we ensure that environmental interests are considered in these rather citizen assemblies? And how can we make sure that the environment is also considered as a sort of agent, stakeholder, or actor? So it's up to you to choose.
No, let's decide. Let's do the environmental thing now. We're not only humans at the table, but also the planet on the table when it comes to decision making. That's very interesting because the mental switch, let's do it after the break. I think it's a very interesting question to do afterwards. But let's start with, so we're now discussing people gathering and dialogue, etc. But how do we include the animals and the plants and etc. etc.
Maybe I can just, there are, again, I will refer to it as sort of experimental or still going on, but there are these discussions about rights to nature. Maybe you have heard about that. I think that might be kind of one of the ways to move forward in the sense of considering the needs of the non-human. And indigenous communities play a very critical role there. And there are, for instance, to my knowledge, in New Zealand, there's the Whanganui River, who had this kind of constitutional right, I guess, so in the sense of representative through the indigenous communities. Because for some indigenous communities, I can say about Maori indigenous community, they feel like that they are part of the land. So they do not really have this kind of Western understanding, the nature and the human. They are already into each other. And from their perspective, they are the river, they are the mountain. And then this rights to nature can be very instrumental to protect the interest of the non-human. But of course, I'm not sure how this may turn into practice in broader level. That's probably back for more experiments in the sense of decision-making processes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I know there are some experience with trying to, one of my colleagues is in a different context, so not in Citizens Assembly, but she's working on a person at the table who imagines that they're the voice of nature, right, or animals. And I think that's really interesting. And I believe it's in Japan, they're also doing with the citizen assemblies, one of the people represents the future. So you have to imagine that you are somebody who lives for the next 100 years. What kind of future do you see, or where do you want to live? And in that way does the dialogue. So I think that are really interesting experiments.
Yeah, I forgot the name of it, but I know a Dutch organization which uses a name for that nature has a seat at the table by a person, so therefore it's always on the table. But maybe I will come up later on. Middens?
Yes, I mean, as you saw in those pictures, this whole community's engagement with this technique began with protecting their forests. And they were custodians of the forest, and then there was struggle with the central government. And as usual, the government would say it is our forest, and people would say it is our forest. And finally, people said that we are taking care of the forest, we are conserving it, we are making use of it, so we will be the ones who will be deciding. And this particular village is the first village in India which has received community forestry rights. In India, we passed a law in 2006 whereby those people who are living in the forest were entitled to have community forest rights. So this village has got rights over 1900 hectares of forest. And they conserve this forest, they make use of this forest, and then that's how the whole process of self-governance actually started with nature. Thank you.
Thank you, Milind. And I just found the word, it's called zoop, this new concept of having a seat at the nature, if you're such an organization. Thanks so much. We'll come back to your question later on, because now it's time for some music. She makes great electropop. It's about challenges we as societies are facing and giving voice to the feelings and what it means for youth. Please, a big hand for Marisa. No, we're fine. We have time. There's enough time.
It's the weather.
It's the weather. Oh yes, it's so influential?
Yeah.
Oh.
It's the switch between outside and inside.
Ah, sure. Yeah, makes sense. Yeah. It's getting cold.
The song is called Alles is verbonden. Everything's connected.
Hoop en vertrouwen, de aarde heeft ons nodig. Oceanen minder blauw en koraal verliest zijn kleur. De ijskappen verdwijnen, de vissen worden ziek. En de oorzaak, dat zijn wij, maar dat willen we niet zien. Waar zijn we bang voor? Bang om de diepte in te gaan, om jezelf tegen te komen, op zoek naar al je dromen. Laat je maar zien, om samen te kunnen gaan staan. Want alles is verbonden en de aarde, dat zijn wij. Hoop en vertrouwen en samen komen we steeds dichterbij. Alles is verbonden, de wereld dragen we over aan het klein. En alles is verbonden en weet dan dat we samen veel sterker zijn. Hoop en vertrouwen, de aarde heeft ons nodig. Oceanen vol met plastic en het water warmt op. De bossen verdwijnen en de dieren worden ziek. En de oorzaak, dat zijn wij, maar dat willen we niet zien. Want alles is verbonden en de aarde, dat zijn wij. Hoop en vertrouwen en samen komen we steeds dichterbij. Alles is verbonden, de wereld dragen we over aan het klein. Alles is verbonden en weet dan dat we samen veel sterker zijn. Alles is verbonden Laten we samen gaan staan en samen veel sterker zijn.
Thank you, Marise. We'll see you back at the end of our discussion. Thank you so much. And after a day like yesterday, even more impactful, if you ask me. Everything is connected. We have so much more to discuss. We have 30 minutes. So let's get started. We have the mental switch, but we'll come to that later. There is how do we mix these systems, representative, citizen, blah, blah. That we have to discuss. But first, Ozan, I would like to explore a bit further. Miriam said something about there's a personal interest, and then you develop yourself into a general interest from a perspective of the ownership stuff that you're studying and also practicing. How is that linked when it comes to personal interests, general interests, ownership? I think it's interesting also to touch this.
Yeah, I think, again, for me, at least for my understanding, it begins with that how we organize our economy.
Yeah.
So that from this economy, how we can think about different forms. For me, or at least particularly from, I draw arguments, and I'm quite inspired by sociologist Eric Olin Wright, who passed away in 2019, but he really thought about this transformation. How can we transform these kind of relations? And he argues about three main values. And if we can organize around three main values, then perhaps we may have a bit more egalitarian, participative, inclusive societies. And then perhaps that's the moment where we can see these interests may align to some extent. I do not think that everyone can get aligned in one particular interest, that there will be always different interests. And then these interests may become more interesting with the notion of power. So, to what extent we can have equal access to material and social means? This is actually how we can have a bit more egalitarian access to the resources, and ownership is there. Who owns what, and whether we may have a say in the ownership. And democracy and freedom, again, then becomes a part of this conversation. Can we meaningfully participate in decisions that have an impact on our lives? So if I own this building, and if I say this building is mine, and if I want to kick you out, then I'm sorry, but there's a problem here, right? Because you may also have a say here. And then the third value is community solidarity. That how we can consider the well-being of others, and can we be responsible to others and not only us? So for me, this alignment of three values can create a bit more opportunities for us to have a say in our future, have a say in the way we organize things. And again, as a very concrete example, for instance, we can think about cooperatives. I go back to this, but there are multiple ways of organizing cooperatives as well. Community-supported agriculture, for instance. I am not sure to what extent you are familiar with this term, but simply it's about we produce the food, we consume the food, we give the decisions about how we produce and consume the food, and we give the decisions together. And for instance, in Utrecht, around Utrecht, there are two examples of community-supported agriculture, and you can actually see that there's a very large network of community-supported agriculture. And the whole idea is, it begins with we own stuff, we give the decision about own stuff. So that's for me the way how we can move forward. I'm not saying that will solve all the problems, because there will be always different interests and there will be always different power relations. And for me, it's a matter of contestation of these kind of power relations. And this probably will bring, how we get organized. How we get organized for these kind of rights, how we get organized for equal sharing of resources, etc. So just if you want, you can check, for instance, Garden Town Kanstrijk, and they are practicing this, or you can check, for instance, as a consumer cooperative, FOCO, Food Cell Cooperative, and they may seem like a small local examples, but they are in principle. We see how they practice these values of equality, fairness, democracy, freedom, community solidarity. So yeah.
Okay. Then take the next step. What I already was asking when it comes to How does it feed into the current systems, the current system of capitalism, of ownership, how it's organized by law? How can we infiltrate or influence or whatever words you want to use when it comes to this kind of corporate thinking into the broader system and the impact of it?
Yeah, can I continue?
Yeah, yeah,
actually, again, there are different perspectives here. So one is about, let's build a kind of counter-hegemonic bloc. Let's create counter power. And how can we do this? That's why I'm interested in bottom-up organizing. And I see lots of potential there in the sense of, for instance, trade unions is a kind of resistance to capitalist relations, or community organizations who are not really into challenging the relations, but by nature they do things different and we can learn from them. And as long as these kind of democratic or economic innovations are picked up by institutional forms, then we see the transformation. So what, for instance, Eric Olin Wright calls this eroding capitalist relations, eroding capitalism. And it doesn't happen from today to tomorrow. It's a matter of process. It's a matter of combination of all these forces. So probably we'll talk about how we can do this or how we can engage with this. But through these kind of engagements, it's not only participating to representative democracy. Through these kind of engagements, day-to-day engagements, and finding ways how we can get organized around these kind of interests for these kind of values, then we can see this potential of transformation.
Yeah, that's interesting. Milind, when it comes to these engagements, how do you see these engagements within the examples you gave and well, the system as such, which is majority-based and veto rules, etc., as you said in the beginning? And then Miriam.
Yeah, to take this discussion further, and what I perfectly agree with what Ozan said, there is a concept which is again used by Mahatma Gandhi. In Hindi, it is called as swaraj. I mean, I'm just coining the word so that people get familiar with that. But it literally means self-rule. Now, self-rule does not mean my rule over you or my rule over her. But self-rule means my rule over myself. So first, I discipline myself, I control my desire, I understand myself, I know what are my roles, responsibilities, and then only I go forward with interacting with others. So the concept of self-rule is very much important in this all these debates and discussions. That you first discipline yourself, you first decide what would be your interest and what are your expectations and what you can do for others, and so on and so forth. So once we discipline ourselves, then it is easier to talk to others and then interact with others and try to understand what they are saying. And perfectly true, Mahatma Gandhi said, and he wanted to make a kind of combination between capitalism on the one hand and so-called communism on the other hand at that time. So he suggested that we should behave in a trusteeship manner. He said that those who want to work with the industry, those who want to earn profit and all, they can do. I mean, capitalist mode of production. But the capitalist should behave as if he or she is a trustee of the wealth that he or she has created. And you should not enjoy that wealth, but you should understand that I am the trustee of this whole wealth, and the wealth is of the whole people. So it is the trusteeship concept which was propagated by him, and that fits perfectly in the modern system. That, okay, you do enterprise, nobody prevents you from doing enterprise. If you have potential, if you have intelligence, please go ahead and do the enterprise. But think that you are a trustee of the environment, you are a trustee of the society, you are a trustee of the enterprise that you are doing, and then alone you will be able to attain a kind of non-violent system where everybody, and that he has used the word, the good of all. I mean, it's not just good of myself or my family or my small community, but the good of all. And the good of all means the good of all, the whole world. And that's how, from a simple principle, you attain to the larger goal of the, welfare of the whole world, welfare of the whole earth. Okay. So that starts with the simple principle of self-rule. Yeah. You start with it, and then you see how giant, how in a big way it can be spread.
Okay, thanks. Miriam, you already touched upon how it went in France and how the engagement was not optimal. Let's elaborate a bit further on the engagement.
I think what's really interesting also, what Milind is saying, is about we have this philosophy that the participants lead themselves, right? I think that's a real important thing, of democratic value in the whole process, that you decide for yourself which steps you want to take. So we give the participants a lot of ownership also on the process they are walking through, but also like on the experts they want to invite and the questions they want to ask at the experts, and not just the experts are giving a presentation and they have to listen, right? But we also have, at least what we're trying, what doesn't always work out well, but we're trying to have the whole system in the room, which means that there are also hoe zeg je nou, werkgevers? I'm sorry.
Employers.
Employers, they're also there. Because they have the means to also bring these outcomes further.
Yeah, totally. Yeah.
So we're trying to do
what's
this.
Their role? Are they part of the table?
They're also part of the table. So the majority are citizens chosen by lot.
Yeah.
But in the ideal situation, there's also just a small part of them, but just because they are also able to bring these outcomes further.
So it's a diversity of perspectives, which is important, but also a diversity of stakeholders, so that things can get fit further.
And aren't that necessary? It aren't stakeholders, because you can only, but that's really important.
Future correcting.
And you can only talk for yourself, right? So that you can't bring in an interest. So you only can speak for yourself in a citizens' assembly.
Cool. Any comments, questions? Yeah. Cashbox over there.
Yes, me?
Yeah.
Okay.
Who are you?
Oh, sorry, I'm Amanda, and I am a project officer, sustainability, and at the municipality of the Bild, here next to it. And I'm wondering how do the power relations work in such an environment, because you have the employers and maybe an employee, or how does that play out, or do you not choose someone that works for that company? Or yes.
Yeah, interesting.
Well, you mostly you don't have them, or they were chosen by lot, right?
But it would be coincidence.
But what we do, we start with small groups, and they change constantly. So, like, if there is like this really big voice, they don't get a stage. So they don't get a say for the whole group. Like, this is what I find really important, so you all have to listen to me. That's not how the dialogue works. And I think the power of this is that because you constantly change, you hear all these kinds of different perspectives, you also see a change. Well, this is all the ideal situation, right? But you also see a change at these employers who are saying, okay, well, we have to make different choices if these are our shared values, and this is what we think is important. So I think what happens in this, which also relate to your question, like, how does this work? Well, it's not something like you can think about. Like, okay, now I'm going to shift from this, from my personal interest to a shared interest. That's not how it works. You have to, it happens somewhere here in your stomach, right? And that's because of the process you're going through. So I think that it's important as well, and it also relates to the song that you feel when you're in a citizens' assembly. Okay, everything is connected. We are connected to each other. Although you voted for a party I really don't understand, we're still connected. You're still my neighbor. We still live in the same city, and we have some shared values. So,
that's also so unique about being in a physical room, I think, which is also
I think that's really important. We try to do it during COVID, to do it online, and it works to some extent, but still, when you're in a room, that's so much more powerful.
I think so, I agree. Ozan, I think there's also a question for you, no? The power relations.
Yeah, for me, it will be always there. I think there might be some common ground for, how to talk, how to engage, and how to respect, and I'm trying to understand. But I find it very difficult that because there are those who have the privileges. And how you will push the agenda so that they will compromise from their privileges.
Yeah.
And that's why I believe that it's a kind of ongoing contestation between different parties, different groups, and it's a matter of organizing. This may sound a bit, perhaps a bit, I don't know, I mean, not wild, but a way of finding way to come together to argue that there will be the counter powers will transform and change this kind of inequalities. So it's, for me, always, there will be always contestation.
Anybody else? No? Yeah.
Hi, my name is Martin. I was wondering, in America you have citizen juries in the legal system.
Yeah.
I believe they work on consensus based, and they are also picked by lot, like by random.
Yeah.
Not necessarily non-violent, maybe. But I was wondering how you see these juries. Like, is that a shining example, or is that actually completely the wrong way of an idea that might have been good?
Interesting.
Yeah, I think in the basic it's interesting that it is really common to, when you get this invite, you go because it's your duty, right? So when you talk about the future I dream about, is that when you get an invite for a citizens' assembly, you're not hesitating to go, but you feel it as your duty, as your democratic right to go there and have a say. And I think what's important for that is that you have really good examples, that people hear about the citizens' assembly, understand that they really have a say, and then maybe we can get to that place where it doesn't matter who gets the invite. They think, okay, this is important. I really need to go there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But when it comes to decision making in a judicial system, is that also?
Yeah, that's not something I don't really have an opinion about that. I think. Yeah.
Okay. Millet, any opinion on it, or you, Ozan?
No, not really.
No, not really. No, it's a specific question. Well, what's interesting is when it comes to the German-speaking part of Belgium has not only a parliament but also a parliament by lots, So people get a letter, I think, and you're now part of the.
Yeah, so they have like this citizens' assembly, a permanent citizens' assembly that decides on topics, and then there are these other citizens that are drawn by lot that are that are having the citizens' assembly about the topic that the other citizens decided about.
Yeah, and then it feeds into the national parliament of the German-speaking part of
so I think that's really interesting as well. Yeah.
It's not completely the same, but. Okay. One more thing to do, I think, when it comes to the mental switch, but also let's make it practical. Many young people here, students, Ozan, you also said to yourself, you're also within the university active yourself. When it comes to daily becoming part of democratic decision making, what kind of examples do you have, and how can we all play a part being in this room?
I think everyone can play their role because we are all engaged in various forms of organizations. So I am part of the university, you are part of a student union, you are part of a citizens' assembly. We are all part of this kind of engagements. So for me, it begins again by how you want to get organized and where is your place in this kind of environment, and what you want to achieve. So that's why I see big P politics where you go to ballot box every 4 years, but actually we are already by our choices engaged into a variety of political decision making. What we buy, what we consume, what kind of transportation we choose. All these things are actually very political choices. And just being aware of this kind of engagements, that you can actually begin by, okay, now I am participating actually in a particular political decision, and then I am part of the student. Are my interests reflected here in this kind of environment? As an employee, are my interests reflected in the decision-making process? So this might be perhaps, at least for me, the beginning by asking these questions and then trying to have a say in your organizational context, whether it is a student union, whether it's a trade union, whether it's the university, through various mechanisms, but also in addition to already established mechanisms, you can always say that is not good enough, and then push for further. And that's where the contestation begins, because you begin contesting the established power relations and you say, let's do things a bit differently. Maybe sometimes this doesn't work, maybe sometimes it works, but this is a kind of, for me, a kind of political kind of struggle, a political contestation. And you begin with this assumption. So I do not want to intimidate, I do not want to say, oh, we are in conflict, no. But I think we need to first begin with this understanding of these different power relations, privileges, inequalities, and from there we should begin. Why there are these inequalities? What are the mechanisms that we can change and transform these inequalities? And it's not only about human, it's also about the non-human, as in the case of climate change. So by asking these questions, by engaging into different programs, shameless self-promotion, my master's program.
No, go for it, go for it.
So, for instance, that's what we offer also to students, that to be aware of all these kind of conflicts, contradictions by engaging with the organizations, because there are a variety of organizations like Strike, like FOCO, like both ends, and we want our students to see how life is not easy, how these kind of struggles are not easy, and you take a part. Inevitably, you take a part depending on your engagement in this kind of environment, in this kind of organization. So for me, this is the democratic struggle, that you become aware of what's going on, and then you take a side, and then you begin working for the interest, whatever it is. So that's my way forward, and through this, with some particular values, perhaps we can envision socially just and more ecologically sustainable societies.
Yeah, yeah. Thanks. I couldn't agree more, also as a former board member of the student union. Yeah. Milind, what do you add?
Yeah.
What is your advice to everybody here when it comes to get into action yourself and the questioning that Ozan is stressing?
Yeah. See, the bottom line is non-violence. We must be committed to non-violence, and we must avoid violence at every step. You know, we commit violence not just in war or struggle or quarrels, but even in our day-to-day relationships, we are often violent. We commit violence by our tongue, by our words, and so on and so on. So our basic commitment should be to create a harmonious, non-violent society, and to that end, we must shape our actions. And to some extent, we have been doing that. I mean, the best example that I could give is the whole LGBTQ movement. You know, 25 years before, we were extremely violent towards LGBTQ communities. But down the lane, 25 years afterwards, our stance had changed, societal stance had changed, we have become more accommodative, we have tried to understand them, and so on and so forth. So what we achieved on that front, something like this also should be achieved on decision making, sharing resources, understanding each other, being compassionate, and so on and so forth. So the underlying principle should be non-violence, love, friendship, and so on. And these alone would be able to help us in the near future. Yeah.
Thank you so much. And even here in the Netherlands, non-violence resonates because there were also attacks on politicians here in the last months in the campaign. Miriam.
Well, first of all, if you get an invite for a citizens' assembly, please
say yes.
Say yes, because it's difficult to get young people in there. That's just.
Oh, yeah, is that true? Yeah.
Well, it depends a bit on where it is, and if you get get paid.
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
For your then if there's no money. Then then you see
then all the generations are easier say yes or
exactly so I think that's one of the things. And if you're in a citizen assembly, please be critical. Do you get enough say about the topic? Do you really get the chance to talk about the things you think are important? Or is there too much things they're saying, no, you're not allowed to talk about it? No, please, if you feel, you have to feel empowered, so be critical if you're in a citizen assembly. And, but also, if you think there's a really difficult topic and my local government or maybe national government isn't doing enough, ask for a citizen assembly. We, as an organization, often help other citizens who say, we want a citizen assembly in our city or town or a region. So I think that's really important as well. And if you want to keep it really small, is start a dialogue with someone who's different from you and stay curious. ask questions, don't judge too soon, right? So I think that's like a really small thing you can do instead of looking at your differences. So.
Okay, thanks. Any comments, questions, people want to, yeah?
I wanted to make a last question about the non-violence.
Yeah.
How do we combat those who are very violent with non-violence? Like, how do we get out of this cycle? If someone is violent to us, how do you respond
in a non-violent way? Yeah, okay, yeah. Milind? Oh, we don't hear you. Is it you or is it us?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, you're back.
Okay, now I had muted myself. Okay, so that question was answered by Mahatma Gandhi many times. And the simple answer is, in an analogy, suppose somebody is coming to you with a sword, what you should have in your hand? If somebody is attacking you with a sword, what you should do? The answer is, you should have the shield. You can't take a sword, because if both of you take the swords, then both of you might die or both of you might be injured. You can't run away, because then that will be cowardice. You have to be there. You have to diffuse the anger, the violence that the other person is having. So you have to take the shield. Sword becomes useless in front of a shield. So it is the shield, and the shield is a very powerful weapon. Or shield signifies your strength, your commitment, your lack of fear, and so on and so on. So that analogy applies to our day-to-day behavior. Then you don't have to run away, you don't have to be a coward, but at the same time you don't have to be violent to the violent person. You can resist him or her, you can stop his or her violence, and you are supposed to use basic means, if at all they are to be used. You shouldn't have hatred towards that violent person. That is the most important part. What happens that when somebody becomes violent, we also become violent in reaction to that violence. That is where the problem is. Other person becoming violent is not an issue. That you becoming violent as a reaction is a problem. So this is again something which you have to try. I mean, this is not a theoretical thing. It is something one has to try, and then one has to find the answer. And I am sure everybody will be able to find the answer.
Thanks so much, Milind. We're out of time, but we had, I think, a great conversation to explore the possibilities next to the classical ways of finding, building up a democracy, the new ways, how we blend them, what the circumstances are, what we learned from each other, etc., etc. So thank you so much for that. I was giving them applause. Martijn, you have been drawing our conversation. You tried. Well, I think you managed, no? Was it, how was the talk? Yeah? You managed to get everything in a visual? Okay. You found your way. Well, we're going to check it out when we have our drinks, because now it's time for a last beautiful performance. Give her another warm welcome, Marise.
Kom maar hier met je hart dat boos is. Kom oud. Mag ik degene zijn die naar je luistert en die jou als jou beschouwt? Kom maar hier met je tranen, kom maar hier met je angst, kom maar hier met je verhalen, zelfs diep in de nacht. En kom maar hier met je hart dat boos is, kom maar hier met je koude hand, kom maar hier met de lat die te hoog ligt. En wij maken alles weer zacht. Een arm om je heen, een kus op je tranen, mijn woorden zacht. Je bent hier niet alleen en ik zal naast je staan. Weet dat je bij me komen mag. Kom maar hier met je tranen, kom maar hier met je angst, kom maar hier met je verhalen, zelfs diep in de nacht. En kom maar hier met je hart dat boos is, kom maar hier met je koude hand, kom maar hier met de lat die te hoog ligt. En we maken alles weer zacht. Ja, we maken alles weer zacht.
Dankjewel.
Big thanks, Marisa, and I don't know how you feel, but this is the future we see are actually needed after yesterday night. So thanks so much for our conversations. Let's have some drinks. Thank you. Thanks, Milland. Bye.